Hi, I've done several videos now, and I've got long ones about credibility, about me, really to understand the person who's saying the stuff to you, yeah? And rather than being a guy just with opinions, I wanted to be a guy with opinions, but with a little bit of background and life experience and academic, interests and whatever. That's the reason for that, yeah? Now, before I go back over these videos that I've already done, I just want to say that, like you, I was born, I'm quite old now, and in that time, in that whole my life today, the only constant has been I, yeah? And everything else, like they said, the reasoning or whatever you learn at school, whatever your parents tell you, has all evolved as you go along, So I didn't really have a language. When I'm born, you don't have a language. It's all there prepared for you, depending on that quality and whatever, and that frames your reality, as you get older. Yeah. So I understand. I think we're in a bit of soup, and I understand. I've been in that soup myself for years, but I'd just like to explain why I did these other videos. Yeah? Santa Claus, the first video I did, Santa Claus, that's about inception and a child. Yeah, I think Christopher Nolan, his movie Inception, it just happens to be here in this day, but that was an amazing movie because Santa Claus, you could have inception in the child of this thing that exists, but that bees, but it actually does not be. It's fiction, non-be, yeah, and then it's about breaking parental trust, yeah. But there are a lot of inceptions even as you get older, like for X Factor and American Idol. Those are inceptions for me, and the format, how they're actually laid out, is like if I described it in Aristotelian or some sort of Platonic form, I would say like you've got the accused, you've got the backstory, you've got the judge and jury and whatever, and it's all very cozy, you get the boy or the little girl or whatever, like that one that stands up there and says they want to be a noun, I want to be a singer. This does not make sense to me. If you sing, but to be a singer, that's just another monetized object. But that's fine. And Carol, the people, some of the people that run that, as a human beings, I think that you're really below a standard, a standard as a human being. Yeah, I think. Right, okay. So, and it's also about the break and parental trust, because when you say there is a Santa, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? Okay, so these sort of inceptions, you need to be a bit wary of these as you go along, and particularly in school, the inception of the triangle prior to where the triangle came. So just ask your teacher, where does the triangle come from? And let her break it down. And then when she breaks it down to a line, it's the shortest between any 2 points. And then when you break that down, you just know what that is. And it's just a representation of a line of sight. You really need to sort of imagine yourself back in 30,000 years ago, before any of this stuff sort of jives up, Alright, Pavlov dogs, the next video I did, that was really about Hume's regularity and resemblance, yeah? And the reason I mentioned that is that he was the antithesis to what we've got to this huge fucking massive bubble that started in 1666-ish, and is right now, which is a mess, and a lot of that stuff was carried forward with the French, the Germans, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and lastly the British. I think the British were the last ones that actually took a certain paradigm into other people's world. Yeah, and there were, at the time this was happening, there were probably a few boots on the ground in what is now called the United States of America. There were Puritans, and people who were running away from Europe and whatever like that. Yeah. So when I talk about Hume's regularity and resemblance, I'm going to later bring that in at some time when I speak about determinism. Yeah, because without determinism, without a design, like an assumed design in the world and how we actually go along, we have no laws whatsoever. Hence, I will be very pro-Aristotelian because I think the idea of the social contract that came in during this time, around about 17th and 18th century, was really it was very premised on Aristotelian contract, and not the bastardized version, the Platonic contract that we've got now. It's just purely transactional, whereas before it was to do with the human being, goodness and things. And I think, you know, I think if you don't go to that sort of Aristotelian or Confucian sort of wisdom or self, you know, I think basically, you know, the zeros follow the zero line, but it's just begging the question, you know, like affirming the consequent, you know, the conclusion. And you think it's here on Earth, you know, that's okay. Right, next thing about the cage in the Pavlov's dog. For me, that the dogs escape from it or they're not. They either die in the system, you know. And I have analogized, as it were, correspondence with distributive systems and the lack of human capacity to look after their, you know, food and shelter, safety and security. So basically, like for me, there's an over-reliance on the distributive system, you know. And I mean, really, you build up the Aristotelian, the self, your basic human capabilities, like you know, therefore, since humans began, you know, you really need to sort of get a grip of that rather than this big zero thing, you know. And what the Pavlov's dogs was also was the fragility of what I perceived as a sort of a fragility in human choice. Yeah. Okay. So, and I see that as, you know, it's it's very, very easy for us to, you know, to you know, like flipping over and just, you know, switch over from one way of understanding oneself, you know, the being. That's what I'm really, or you know, or you, or whatever. You know, what the choices we make. I think some of them really need regrounding. Yeah. And when I spoke about that inception things and the fragility of human choice, I was actually talking about that form in some respects. You know, the X Factor, America's Got Talent sort of format. You know, because while it's all cozy now, remember like in the 1980s, like when these non-persons, these legal non-persons, were getting all cozy visions and missions and stuff like that. You know, the corporations getting, you know, our vision is this, and you know, our mission in our life is this, and what have you. You know, it's make it nice and cozy, yeah. And that was during the mergers, like that was the deregulation period as well. You know, Reagan and Thatcher, what have you. Yeah. So where am I going? Yeah. So that allowed a lot of these other beings, these non-beings. Remember, if you're living in Ireland, you're not just the human population. You've also got a population of non-persons that can take you to court, and the judge in front of you will judge you and this non-being on an equal basis. And that's how bad your law is. I mean, you want to defeat human beings. This is like, I mean, it's in Irish law, you know. But Ireland's going to be really shocked because I've got a different view of what Ireland is and what the people are. And I take a lot of that from Professor Barfield Cunliffe. He was the professor of European archaeology in, I think, in Oxford. Yeah. Okay, and he's quite an important guy because he's making the people of Ireland indigenous to Ireland. Yeah. Which and with it comes some certain protections. Yeah. Okay. Right. Fragility of the next video I did was being and everything else. Prior to 1666, everything was God's will, right? That was where the legitimacy was. Yeah, like I mean, legitimacy to rule, the authority. That's the thing. A-U. Remember your verbs. Yeah. A-U. Authority. Yeah. It means the one who writes. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, if you think of it in terms of demiurge or you know, if you think there's a creator, or if you think there's a universe, and the universe is the one that interacts all together, yeah, it's fine. If you think there's a separate creator, yeah, that made the world, yeah, that's okay. It's a different type of thing. But there are certain different ontological roots, then, you know, ontological derivatives from that, yeah. You know that that might be couched in your language. Like, I mean, I don't know what your paradigm is, you know, so. You know, all I really care about is that you acknowledge your being, you know, your being, and you prioritize your being over something non-being. Yeah, that's all I'm just showing, you know, like choice is choice, you know. So from 166 Descartes, I think therefore I am, the sentence is connected by two parts with a therefore. Therefore is the necessary connection. That's why therefore, like, in other words, that's purely assumptive. Yeah. And it was the removal of Aristotle's final cause and final end of purpose. Yeah, that's basically what if you take that final end and purpose away from human beings, It's rather like the state we've got now. We've got things like, human beings have moved piles way progressed, yeah. But the thing is, looking at it looks like things might break down, and it's really catching on to what things were really good. There was one there. The sentence connection the next second. Removal of yes, the final cause, final end, and purpose. In a distributive system, you don't need people to have final end purpose, because you're going to write what their final end, what their purpose is. Maybe not now, but the X factor, while it's a nice cozy, like the child up there and so on. 2 centuries down the side, it'll be a different story, and it'll be different. It'll be the same format, but everybody accepts it, because we've been watching it for ages, and it's a really cool format. I think you can improve on the way the code goes. Because remember, like Aristotle's efficient cause and the final purpose, like that. If we translate that into vernacular something, that is, the end justifies the means, or the means justify the ends. That's the question there, Because formal cause and material cause are not even really part of that, Okay, so 11 minutes. Descartes, I said Descartes' dictum is a blank check. So it's no check, there's no check in boundaries. That's where you end up with this huge bubble all over the planet. It's non-natural legal person. I said with that. Person, the word person is Christian. It's person, son. Person, So you can't have a non-natural or legal person. All right, Ireland, no Companies Act. The Gardaí, in my view, in the Constitution, I think the Gardaí needs to have one. See, the state there is a vehicle. That's what it was. It was a vehicle for governance. That's all it was. It's not an ontological reality. So I think in order to keep that in check, the Gardaí really need to be the enactment needs to come out, and the Gardaí need to be written into the Constitution, with one foot inside the state and one foot out, because the half that's in there is still the people, and the other half are citizens of the state. The straw men, if you like. Next. The adoption of zero, which underpins and is inherent in theoretical statements, laws of the universe. I see. I'm not a determinist in the way that I'm not going to put numbers to this stuff. But if you take in zero, well, and that changes into you, and you believe that you want to believe a system such as the idea of the state, distributive systems, and whatever like that as being the way forward with no ontological, no existential connection. That's fine. If you want to pick that stuff, it's only a choice. So, but I don't see. I think Hume's regularity and resemblance is a far better explanatory explanation when you go back to Pythagoras and remove the things of it and reenact that which Pythagoras' ratios were really applied to, and that was music. So music's going to play music and vibration would be an awful lot thing, because everybody's got a fucking vibe, And there's another thing where the normatives came in there and wanted to normatize everything. They took the standard A and they made it 440. There was Verdi's 432 and there was another 415. But the thing is, what it does is it narrows all the musicians down to one sort of causal spectrum in terms of the music and the syncopation, whatever, and how they actually think. Because it's entirely different. These different frequencies, how they connect with the human being, entirely they're different. Maybe not explicitly, but it's so subliminal that it really sort of, look, you've got a pair of ears, you can do it yourself, and you can listen to different frequency general and modes, Dorian and Aeolian and stuff like that. But if you get into that, then you start beginning to understand what Pythagoras is talking about, because Pythagoras was connected to the up there, But I think but Plato didn't quite go that way, And they already knew that the hour is spherical. They already knew that it was a sphere, and they already knew that men were animals. But it's going to take Darwin years later to formalise that. And not only that, but you've got to remember, it's quite important to remember that the idea that your man who did the IT crowd and Father Teddy brought it up the other day, and he says about this Russian guy who said that an uninformed majority will always lose out to an informed minority. Yeah, and I think that the Plato and Aristotle would quite possibly be held and withheld by possibly the Roman Catholic Church. But that's just fucking conjecture, you know what I mean? Because I get a bit of cynicism. I got a bit of cynicism in there. Yeah. So Kuhn's paradigm extended. Now, just a reminder, Kuhn's paradigm was the constellation of beliefs, values, behaviours, techniques, technology shared and framed by in the language. And the language that we got 27 signs or whatever like that in English language, 5 vowels and whatever that. And but all this language being nicked by the non-being, you know. Big words that came out like them taking thousands of years to arrive into existence, you know. But you know, with discovery in the planet and these non-beings, you know, science, mathematics, they're just taking these words, you know what I mean? It's just the Nick man's name, Tesla. That was a real guy, and somebody there for commercial reasons decides to take his name and call it Tesla's thing for his thing. And he connects that with that association now with Tesla and that guy. Now it's all nice and warm, you know, because it's Tesla, you know. He was the guy with the light and all that stuff and the 432s, I think, you know. But anyway, I'm going to move on to yeah. So basically, and then what happens is that within a paradigm, with a constellation of beliefs, rather like what we have now. I mean, there's a lot of different people, a lot of different groups, tons of paradigms, yeah. But the overreaching paradigm at the moment is based on zero, you know, non-being, these non-things. And zero and the state where you've got to literally give yourself, you know. But if you're happy doing that, it's your only choice. I tell you. Affirming the consequent, that's begging the question. Self-referential. If you want to be zero, you carry on, and it's really difficult to explain. Sometimes words don't exist, you know. Like if you ask a woman, you know, when you had your first child and you held your first child in her arms, I mean, are there any words? I mean, really, is there a language that you can use that would actually be representative of what that woman would feel with her child? And, you know, anyway, I'm digressing. The answers which emerge from the equation, and then there's the crisis, and I think it's zero. I think that's a freaking 400-year-old bubble that's about to, unless we change. And in my head, it's a 1,000-year plan. I think Europe, you know, they're going to rip. It's a cultural and spiritual freaking scorch there with Europe. That's what my gut feeling is. Yeah, and I think we need to keep cultures. That's my view, because I think if you lose the cultures, you lose every existence of all those cultures. You know, there's no world order. There's no Prussian freaking crap here. Yeah. And take all that Kant and all that German shit and fucking chuck it. You know, it ain't working. It's symphony. You need the cultures. You can make a language, and you can make the language. You can choose your phonics. You can choose what the song will be, and then you can have verse, chorus, true, chorus. Everybody. You can manage it. You'll always have the 4 horsemen. There's no question. But this will be a different one. This will be a being rather than non-being. And things will change. Currency will. If you go back to Aristotle, you can build the person and read, but you got to restate what your purpose is. And I'm not saying Darwinian. I think Darwin maybe formalized something that perhaps like. Plato and Pythagoras already knew that the animism bit, you know, and I think that there worked its way into maybe Old Testaments and stuff like that, and I can understand why, and I can understand why there's a lot hidden, but you can be better. I think people can be better. I really think. Just what I'm thinking. Has anybody ever heard Lana Musolucci? Yeah, she did this song "Bukas Nala Mama Halil" or something like that. I'll tell you something, I don't understand Tagalog, but it's just knocks me out every time, you know. Voice of an angel, that girl. So, right, so you got the beliefs, the values and techniques and all that crack, you know, and basically everything that you believe about the world is that's your paradigm, yeah? And then the questions which arise from that paradigm, the modes, the rules, your behaviours, the language, how you organise your vowels and things. There's far too many nouns on this planet. Archaic Irish had more verbs than everything, because everything moves, and yet we use objects. Stasis, you know, state. You know what I mean? We use state, where the whole thing moves. If we individuate Maybe if we individuate in a different way, things we want to know about smoothly. But you need to have consensus on this, I think. You know, consensus on consideration. It would take about 100, maybe 150 years just to get consensus and consideration on human life and what it means, yeah, for everybody, I think. Legal crisis. So what happened was, I think that the crisis began when they introduced non-being into the world. That's when you could go crazy with I think therefore I am. So you can create this stuff that doesn't exist. It's like if I write 15 million pounds on this, and I hold it up to you and say, right, does that mean I've got 15 million pounds? I don't. It's a piece of paper, nothing. Okay, so what we end up is we got a world on basically perceptions and how we engage in the world, and then we got the conceptions that we can create from that natural world, yeah. And then we got the inceptions, which is all the crazy shit I think from the last 400 years. You know? I mean, not no in the last 100 years. I mean, just bollocks. That American values and all this shit. What about human values? Fuck American values. Americans are humans at base. They're human beings. What is the human being values? Or is it different from anybody else? I mean, please, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, and I apologise for that. I don't mean to relegate people or say what they. It's just I just want to open the door to some choices, perhaps. You know, that something might be something else other than what you might believe it is in your paradigm. Yeah. So. I've got a game, by the way, and I'm going to do a game, and it's really for guys who write stuff. It's called the Cartesian dance. Yeah. So we're going to mess around with a lot of paradigms and stuff like that, and what you can think. And there's a lot of rules like no begging the question, no affirming the consequent of zero. Yeah. Can't have that. But we're working on it. Yeah. The last thing was I said there's 400 years of concept building. So either way, you got being, and then that's how evolution. At being, you got will, volition, yeah, which is being. You know, whether you couch it as voluntary or involuntary. And then you got necessity. You know, you got food and all that crap. I'll go through Maslow and stuff like that. But his window, his view there is on the needs. He's got a theory of human motivation, but it's based on needs. Yeah, he's the guy that says to every nail, to every hammer, everything is a nail. You know, and that's why our paradigm dictates what our world is, type thing. You know, or you can go for thought, and if you have thought, and that will result in the diminishment of human beings. I mean, it will reduce human beings to nothing, look to number. Effectively, what's happening now, and human, the value of human is commercialized, and the values that you look are heavily commercialized, and hence you got Trump and stuff from people who, in my view, I think lack some of the virtues I'd like to see in the leader. You know. So it's zero or any other. So it was zero or any of the infinite paths you could take. I'm going with regularity and thing. I'm going with evolution. I'm going with whatever the position of around here is reflects here, and whatever reflects here reflects outward as well. And that's the main thing in them. Okay, and I think that's it. I hope it's not too late. I'm going to do another few videos, but that was a synopsis. You know, the Santa Claus, the Pavlov dog, you know, and then the being and everything else, and then the Queen's power that makes it, and then final destination is the universal zero, which we got now. You know, like the universal zero for nerds would be one ring to rule them all, one ring to bind them, all that stuff, you know. Or you might consider these non-beings as stranger things. But when you consider your own being, have a think about avatar. But rather than having, the being somewhere else, and you know, you got the avatar now, rather than having it there, assume it's around you. Yeah, it's an easier concept with which to proceed.